Hokura awoke in a dead sweat. Her ears were ringing as her head throbbed in agony, blurring her vision. She reached blindly over to her nightstand, grabbed a syringe, and injected its contents into her arm. Within seconds, her vision began to clear. She could see that daylight was already filtering into her room. The alarm clock on the stand read that it was already 9:20 a.m. Hokura let out a sigh. She had roughly 10 minutes to get ready and knew they would be waiting for her. Stretching her muscles, her nerves started to ease as she got up. She put on a pair of blue jeans that lay on the floor beside her bed and pulled on a white-ribbed tank top. Stopping by the mirror to glance at herself, she pulled her long brown hair into a ponytail. She had only aged 20 of her 25 years until her body had stopped. Her body was taut and toned after rigorous training, months of combat, and being on the force for 9 months. She considered her 5-foot, 4-inch frame short for her age, but her 120-pound body was a solid mass of firm muscle and raw power. There was a hint of glee in her light brown eyes this morning. Later in the afternoon, she had an appointment with Professor Dorian and Dr. Allen. Hokura slipped on her runners after exiting her tiny bathroom and made her way down to the mess hall. "Morning, Hokura," Amara chimed. She was sitting at a table with a coffee in hand. Accompanying her was the third child, Adam, who had his head down on the table as he rested his hand on a steaming cup. "Good morning," Hokura smiled while walking up to her best friend. Amara had reached her 22nd year. She was the second child to survive the experiments and had short, sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. Her figure was more masculine than Hokura's. Amara had strength, whereas Hokura had speed, but they were both evenly matched when it came to combat fighting ability. Hokura sat down with her two friends, her only friends really, besides the professor and his assistant, Dr. Allen. "So, what's for breakfast?" Hokura asked, stealing a quick sip of Amara's bland and already cooling coffee. "Same as always," Adam murmured, his face still buried in his arms as his head rested on the metal table of the cafeteria. His short black hair was tufted up and sticking out. His muscles were sturdy, even though he had a gaunt exterior. He hoped it would fill out in the 3 years of aging that he had left. Hokura always thought that Adam had the most unique eyes left on Earth. One of them was light brown, while the other was a pale green with a slash of blue. "Long night?" Hokura smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Just a continuation of the last few nights, tracking down rebels who are breaching the wall and bringing in more weapons. You think you've finally gotten a hold of one band, and another one comes up on the far end of the city. Unfortunately, the Night Watch was chasing them around too. It was a good thing I had Amara with me." "It doesn't make any sense. We have soldiers guarding the wall. How are the rebels still even getting in?" "All in all, I just couldn't sleep last night. I think my mattress needs to be replaced," Adam grumbled, lifting his head and sipping his coffee. "Aw, moan and complain about what was considered an easy night, and then whine about your mattress when you could just as easily sleep on your couch," Amara teased, and Hokura chuckled. "So, when are you back on the force?" Amara asked, turning to Hokura. Her tone was a serious one. "I've been having some awful headaches lately. Same with some really bad ringing in my ears. Other than that, it really didn't affect me. I have an appointment with the professor this afternoon, so I hope to be back tonight. 2 weeks off duty has been enough for me," Hokura answered. "Didn't affect you? I found you like 50 feet from the initial blast, totally knocked out," Amara scoffed. Hokura looked away from her friend. She felt foolish. "You're my best friend. I just don't want anything to happen to you." Amara apologized, resting her hand upon Hokura's arm, trying to comfort her from her harshness. "Yes," Adam spoke up. "Remember what the professor has drilled into us? We may not age, but that doesn't mean we're immortal. You could have been killed." "The third child is right." A deep voice came from behind the three. It was Professor Dorian. He was wearing a dark blue suit with a red dress shirt underneath. It looked more like something an officer or commander might wear. His glasses were so tinted they nearly shielded his blue eyes. He stood a tall man, taller than Adam. The professor must have been over 6 feet. He had dark brown hair that seemed black when it wasn't in the light, and a beard that he kept neatly trimmed. Hokura always thought of him as a ruggedly handsome man, even though she guessed he was possibly in his mid-30s. The three turned and stood.
Good morning, sir.
they said, bowing their heads. Dorian only laughed. That's enough now. We're not in training or studies, so enough with the formalities. I hope you're all enjoying a good breakfast. Adam rolled his eyes quickly enough that only Amara caught him. Why can't we leave the facility and get something other than cafeteria food? Adam asked, but knew the answer. Dorian only chuckled. I'm sorry, my children, but I cannot allow you to wander the streets. You would stick out like a sore thumb, and only negative attention would be brought your way. Maybe in time I'll allow it, but not with the rebels about, even in the daylight hours. Dorian replied with a hint of sympathy for the group. Besides, we're making breakthroughs every day with the GMO processing with our foods. It'll get better in time. We're peacekeepers. We're only allowed to be out in the shadows of night. Who knows what the civilians would do if they knew we were casually walking around? Amara scolded Adam, who shot back. The two squabbled as Hokura looked on. The professor put his hand on her shoulder. I'll see you later on this afternoon, Hokura. He smiled warmly at her and walked away. I saw that, Amara cried, pointing at Hokura. I've told you for months, but I saw it that time. Hokura stood stunned, looking as if her friend had lost it. I told you so, Amara continued. What? Hokura cried, wondering just what Amara thought she had witnessed. Amara grabbed Hokura and pulled her in closely, whispering into her ear. I saw a look that the professor gave you, first child, Amara whispered. Hokura backed away. Oh, Amara, you're so full of it, Hokura said, turning away. She was starving at this point, and even if the food weren't great, at least it would fill her stomach. I saw you smiling this morning when you told me that you had an appointment with the professor. Amara butted in. She's got you there, Hokura, Adam chimed in, looking as if he was going to go Hokura's way of getting some breakfast. Hokura's face reddened as she couldn't hide her blushing cheeks. Honestly, it's not like that. Hokura smiled, which only made her brighten. Then what is it? Amara blurted, not allowing Hokura a second of silent thoughts to herself. I don't know. I really enjoy the professor's assistant, Dr. Allen. He's just so kind to me. He always has a way of bringing me new canvases for my paintings. Hokura blushed. Adam pulled at Amara's arm. Are we going to get some food, or are you just going to sit here and gossip all morning? Yeah, would you mind? I want eggs and toast, and get Hokura a good, hearty breakfast. Can't have her going to this scandalous appointment on an empty stomach, Amara said, waving Adam away. Adam only shook his head as he walked towards the cafeteria buffet. Hokura knew he'd be back with enough food for all of them. Hokura grabbed Amara's arm and scooted closer to her. Scandalous. Where do you get such thoughts like this? Hokura said, shaking her head. It's nothing like that. I just really like him, that's all. Besides, it's not like I get to see him often since he's always in the lab and working with the professor. Amara searched her best friend's eyes and decided to drop the subject. So, have you heard what's been going on out there lately? Amara spoke in a hushed tone. Sounds like the city walls are being breached every night by bands of rebels. They've been exporting huge amounts of weapons, but unfortunately, between us and the Night Watch, we just can't keep track of everything that's being brought into the city. The word is that the civilians are buying them and keeping them within the city. She shifted her weight. I just don't get it. The civilians need to learn to be grateful. The city took them in, gave them a place of refuge to live, protect them from the anarchy, even brings in penance and lets them work, and they go out and bring in weapons. For whatever reasons, I can only imagine. Most likely to rob merchants like themselves who barely have anything. Hokura sat silently for a second as she gathered in what Amara was saying. The night she was taken down, it had been an exported bomb that had gone off while she was chasing down a rebel. The city was right not to allow weapons inside its walls. I don't understand why we can't just live in peace. Why there's so much envy in a world when we all have less. Hokura shook her head. That's because mankind is born evil and greedy, Adam said matter-of-factly, setting down 2 large trays of food. All right, enough of this down talk. I'm starved. Amara cried and started to dig in, reaching for the dry toast and the eggs. Just like I said, Adam chuckled, grabbing at a muffin and taking a bite. I guess we should all be grateful for what we have, even if it's genetically modified eggs. He looked at Amara, who grimaced as she took a large bite. and what we've been granted here in Meridiana. We live here under protection. We have more resources than anyone outside. I bet the outsiders have better food than this, Amara muttered. At least they've got the bread tasting a bit better, but the eggs still taste like paste. But I agree, and that's where our duty comes in. It's up to us to protect the civilians. Amara huffed, taking another bite. They'd just be blowing themselves or others up with those weapons if we didn't confiscate them. Hokura smiled. She knew Amara held her code of being a peacekeeper in high regard, even if at times she couldn't make sense of why things happened between the city and the rebels that none of them could explain. The three friends made small talk through breakfast. Other compound workers and scientists made their way through the cafeteria, some in large groups, some alone, since it was already late. Hokura figured a lot of them were taking their first break, yet it seemed that they always stayed clear of the three youngest-looking people in the room and sat off to the side tables of the large hall. Hokura finished and started getting up. "Sorry to eat and run, guys. I'm sure I'll catch you two later," Hokura said. Amara grinned. "I'm going to be in the training facility's combat gym all day, brushing up on some hand-to-hand," she mocked as she swung her fists in the air. Adam looked up, tiredly at Hokura. "I'm going back to bed. I'll catch you two at dinner hour." Hokura nodded. She wanted to hit the speed track before she showered off and went to the medical facility. She made her way down to the training facility, yet another massive part of the first floor of the compound. It, too, was filled with large gymnasiums. Some held weights and benches, while others had padded floors that were used for combat training. There were even smaller rooms where one could practice their hand coordination with a simulation fighting screen. The facility was rarely empty, as the Night Watch and Day Watch soldiers used the different stations to better themselves when it came to their duty. The Day Watch was more for civilian policing, making sure that Meridiana's people kept the peace amongst each other. The Night Watch went out at curfew to make sure that civilians weren't on the city streets. They were also to report in if they discovered any rebel activity within the walls. The peacekeepers were the lead soldiers when it came to disruptive activities during the night. Because of their genetic makeup, their abilities were no match for any mere human. They made the perfect super soldier to defend the city. Hokura walked into the speed training gymnasium. The track room, like all rooms of the training facilities, was all devoid of any color other than the floor, which had a beige track path around the perimeter of the room. There were computer terminals along the far wall, along with medical equipment to test heart rates and other such equipment to monitor physical aspects. Hokura had changed into her track clothes, black spandex shorts and a sports bra. The room operator greeted her as she walked in. "Good day, Hokura." Annette smiled. "What would you like to test today?" she asked, walking over to a large computer to type in Hokura's ID. Annette was one of the top female tech operators of the facility. She wore a white lab coat over a sky-blue turtleneck and black slacks. She had shoulder-length wavy blonde hair and blue eyes, which were framed by thick black glasses. Hokura guessed her to be in her mid-30s, but never asked about her assumption. Maybe it was because age was irrelevant to her. Then again, it had been hard to tell in the compound. It seemed that everyone, from the doctors to the scientists, and even the watch guards, was all around the 30s range, other than some government officials such as Governor Larson. "Racetrack time trial," Hokura responded, walking up to where Annette had been punching in Hokura's ID. Hokura looked at the sensors laid out on the table and started to attach them to her body without any small talk. Once they were in place, she walked over to the starting point. "Sensors attached," the operator stated over an intercom, typing into the computer at the far end of the gymnasium. "Heart rate, normal. Blood pressure, normal. Brainwave activity, normal. Countdown, beginning." Hokura edged herself, focusing on the long, narrow track in front of her, which wrapped its way around the edge of the gymnasium. She hadn't been too impressed with her last time trial. She was going for larger improvements today. Countdown started. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Annette's voice boomed. Hokura took off, exerting herself as hard as she could in hopes of making an improvement. She had been taken by surprise by the bomb. She hadn't been on her game that night. She needed to do better, be faster and stronger, to be her best. She cleared the track quickly and went into a slow walk, waiting for the results. Heart rate, good. Blood pressure, normal. Brainwaves, normal. Body temperature, normal. Annette's voice echoed. Time trial, 118.24 seconds. Hokura sighed in relief and smiled as the sweat ran down her stomach. That was 3 seconds faster than her last trial. Hearing the news gave her the satisfaction and confidence that she needed to feel that she was ready to go back onto the force that evening. Would you like to run any more time trials today, Hokura? Annette asked. Hokura caught her breath. No, thank you, Annette. That was just the boost that I needed for the day. I have an appointment in about an hour anyway, thank you, Hokura replied. The operator walked over and handed Hokura a towel. Your brainwaves seem to have fluctuated after the race. I take it you have something on your mind? Annette commented as Hokura wiped the sweat from her body. Hokura blushed that she had been found out. I was just thinking about getting back out there tonight, that's all, she lied. Her thoughts were actually racing about her appointment this afternoon. Annette smiled. The professor will deem when you are ready to go back out on the force. Don't push yourself too hard. Either way, I hope you're happy with your results. You're really improving your speeds. Hokura nodded firmly. I hope that I'm deemed sooner rather than later. Have a good day, Annette, she said and walked out. Hokura made her way down the hallway and up to the housing floor and towards her room. The facility was a vast maze of operating rooms, council rooms, closed-off corridors, and housing for the workers. Every scientist lived on grounds. The professor even supposedly lived somewhere on the facility grounds, although Hokura didn't know where. She never really pictured him living anywhere since he was always somewhere other than his living quarters. The scientists and operators lived on the second floor. The 3 children lived on the third, along with the main team of the stem cell researchers, although Hokura could never recall ever really seeing any of them in the hallways. That was most likely because they were up early while the peacekeepers slept. By the time the 3 were leaving for duty, most of the compound had already tucked in for the night. Hokura's mind wandered. She wondered where Dr. Allen and the professor were stationed among the living quarters. She wondered what Dr. Allen's room might look like, and with that, her cheeks reddened as her heart fluttered in a way she had never really felt before.